on this computer, I guess. Okay.
Yep, I see it's recording.
Okay, well, there we go. Usually Craig's on here kind of moderating things, so I have to figure out all the technology. So, but thank y'all for stopping in tonight. And we wanted to have, we have 2 or 3 different webinars throughout the year covering special topics that maybe the training doesn't cover, but things that we feel like are felt needs for our workers. And we were just thinking about families and traveling with kids, and that is, you know, brings up the question, what am I going to do with my children while I'm doing a Let's Start Talking project? And so with Let's Start Talking, we have a strong desire for children and families to serve together. We feel like one of the great ways of building your children's faith is to see them and witness you, but also participate with you on an LST project. So we want to make sure that we've addressed any concerns you have about serving as a family. So to get us started, Kim, why don't you just introduce yourself and tell kind of what your journey with traveling with your kids has been. I'll share briefly about mine, and then we'll touch on some best practices, and then have time to answer any specific questions.
Okay, so I'm Kim Lambert, and we got started involved with Let's Start Talking before kids came along. We went on our first project in 1990, and then we had our first of 3 kids in 93, and we went on our first project in 94. So we have been on, I think, 18 or 19 projects, and only about 3 of those have been without children. Although, Cavett, you know that I had Scott with me, so I always had a child with me.
Always. Very well said.
I'm very well experienced in taking children. But, yeah, you know, I think for us, the spiritual formation of our children seeing that God is much bigger than their world is kind of, if I had to summarize it all together, it would be that we were able to show them that God is much bigger than just their Malibu community or their El Segundo community or their Texas community here. So, yeah, we kind of had a philosophy of have babies will travel. They could be fussy and messy and cranky at home, or they could be fussy, crazy, cranky, and messy in Germany or in Russia or wherever it was we were going. And so we felt like as a family we could figure it out, and we're glad that we did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like Kim and Scott, we started before kids as well, and then just kept going each summer. So we've been, you know, with 1 kid, with 2 kids, with 3 kids, and then with toddlers and middle school age and teenagers, and now we're taking our college kids with us. So kind of with every level, but it has been a little while since I took real little ones. But I have always we have fond memories of our time together as a family, each of our different summers. And one thing I'll just say is that it's always an adventure when you go with your family, because as much as planning and anticipating what's going to happen, what we found for our family was that every year was different. And we were usually having to be fairly flexible on what our expectations were for us or for our kids, depending on what the situation was. And so always we felt like there was a spot for our kids. And in some years we thought we knew what it was going to look like, and it didn't look like that. And then later, you know, it looked like it on a different project. And so, but I'll never forget, there was one project where we were going to Hungary, and we were going to read in a mall, and I had 3 young boys, like 10, 6, 5, I don't know what ages they were, but they're fairly young. And as we're on the plane going over, I tell Craig, I said, you know, we're going into my worst nightmare. And he's like, why? And I said, I cannot imagine sitting all day in a mall with 3 little boys. And And so as we flew over, we started, just talking through that. What is this going to look like as a family? And it turned out to be one of our best experiences. And so God just gave us good ideas, and we were able to work through a lot of things. So if there's something about your project you're concerned about, I would say maybe voice it a little earlier than I did on the plane ride over. Gives you a little more time to be creative and thinking and everything. One of the things that I just remember saying quite a bit when people would look at me and say, I just can't believe you travel with your kids. I could never do that. One of the things that I remember myself saying a lot was, well, it's one of the harder things I do all year, but it's one of the best things I do. And the reason I said that was I didn't want to give people the impression that going on a trip and living in a fishbowl 24/7 is easy, because it's not. It's not easy to allow yourself to have that kind of exposure to people. But I found, and our family found, that this was just one of the best things we did as a family, because as we learned to parent in a very public way, especially when our kids were small, we were being examples to the church family. A lot of these churches we went into, maybe it was just a single parent that was trying to raise their kids, or maybe they were young Christians and they hadn't seen parents disciplining in a godly way. They hadn't seen, they kind of idolized Americans. And so then we come in and we kind of lower the standard a little bit, because we were very real with 3 boys. And yet, like, I remember one year the missionary picked us up at the airport. I had a nursing baby at that time, and they were like, what is LST sending us? How will y'all get anything done? He told us this at the end, that this was in his mind. But at the end, he says, but you accomplished a lot while you were here. So I appreciated that, because we did feel like we had worked very hard. And I just wanted to know that the work we were doing, even though maybe we weren't having as many readers as what we can do now, back then we had to moderate that a little bit. I wanted to do it to be helpful to the local host, and we did find that we were. So Kim, when you just think about and remembering back when you traveled with, let's talk about smaller children first. When I think of smaller, I would say anywhere between 9 and 1 years old or something like that. What are some of your best practices that you remember from that time period?
Well, I would say one thing to keep in mind is that your kids are a great magnet. People love to see families and to meet new kids, and so it was just kind of a general icebreaker. It just kind of made it easy to have something to talk about, and so that was always very helpful. I also, do you want to talk specifically about travel or just the project in general, Leslie?
It could be either.
Anyway, okay.
Or both.
So the other thing is that you have the opportunity for your readers to potentially bring their own children, to encourage them to come, and maybe you can match up. I know that we would try and, it was my kids were in that age where they could sit a little bit. We would have them sit with us and maybe have to be quiet, or they could help point out certain things. Or if the reader would bring their own child, they might have a play date right there with you. Or and so it wasn't a detriment to have other people's kids come alongside. We also, one thing that was wonderful for my children is and I don't know, in your situations, you guys are just going as a family, you don't have additional teammates, but there might be some other adults that, or college age or high school age, where you could match them up to do just kind of be a buddy, if you will. Sometimes we would have college students, Pepperdine students, that were with us, and we would kind of assign out the chores and the things that teams needed to do. So we would always match our kids up with the college student. But in your situations, that you might be able to find someone at the church that's around the building regularly, where they would let your kids help in the kitchen or help set up the children's room for the Sunday. We also used our kids a lot to help us plan the parties. We really tried to integrate them into the planning of them, and they have great ideas. We also played a lot of Uno. So whatever your family card game is, or if you don't play cards, you still need to bring Uno or something like that. One of the highlights for us with our kids was the reminder that we only had to do one thing as a family, and that was to be on an LST project. We didn't have soccer and piano or homework. We just got to be there together doing an LST project. And so if you could kind of go in and remind yourself of that from the get-go, you will just, it's a sweet spot. There's very few families that get to do something like that, where you're pulled together, all focused on one thing for 2 weeks. It's just golden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I agree with all of that. One of the things I do agree with is Uno. If your kids are big enough to play Uno, it's a great game, and it's all over the world. And so my kids over the years found it to be a lot of fun to learn all the different rules, because each one would have a new rule that they had added to the game. And so now when we're at home, we have to say, are we playing this Brazilian style, or is this Hungarian style, because they had different rules. So that was kind of a fun Uno heritage that we gained as we moved on. But as our kids were bigger, a lot of times the readers would stay and they would play Uno with them or some other game after, stay an hour afterwards and just hang out with the kids, or they might come early because they wanted to see the kids and do something with them. So that was really nice as well. One of the things we did tell our kids, so our kids actually got along better on our project than they did really at home, because we would tell them, that we are living in this fishbowl, that people are watching how we're interacting, and that it's very important that when we are reading, that they are getting along, so that I don't have to stop what I'm doing to correct or have to redirect them. And so they usually would save their arguing to at least in between my readers, and very rarely did they interrupt me. And I thought that was a good lesson for them to learn, that their needs were important, that I was going to meet their need, but there was even a greater need, and that was mom and dad getting to share Jesus. And so, like what Kim was saying, as they transitioned to different ages, we did different things with the reading. So when at 5 years old, my oldest son, Joshua, said, "Hey, Mom, you've been reading with these people, but I want to be a reader with you." So we slotted him in as one of my readers, and we went through, starting on the project, read through the workbooks together. And when we came home, we continued it. We went through all the workbooks so that he would know the stories. Then after that year, he had learned to read. And so then he started sitting with me. And I would say, I want you to pick one or two readers that are your favorite readers, and you're going to sit with me and help with the lesson. Now, I had to help him understand that this lesson wasn't about him, and that he couldn't answer all the questions, but that he could help and we could have a discussion, but that it really was about how we were going to interact with the reader. And so that took a little coaching, but then that was good modeling for when he got old enough to be able to start conducting their own readers. And initially, when he was like 13, 14 is when he was ready to start doing his very own lessons. Before then, there were a couple of children around that knew some basic English, and he did some basic classes for them. Then as he got older, he was able to actually get some teenage readers. But what we found was that 2 or 3 initially was enough. That took enough brain power for him. And then, you know, to them, when he was by 16, he could do a fairly large load. Even at 16, he probably didn't do a full load. I think his senior year is when he took on 100% a full load. And each of the kids have been a little different in that, and we've let them, you know, kind of dictate what they feel like they're able to do. And then the other thing we've done is just incorporate them into all aspects of the project. So like Kim was saying, the parties, but also meal planning. We've let our kids from a very young age, we'd say, okay, well, today you're going to be in charge of the meal. So you know, when they were real little, I partnered with them. I said, okay, what is it you want to eat? Okay, well, we're going to go to the grocery store. We're going to need these things to make it. And I let them be in charge of it, even though I was partnering very closely with them. But learning to shop at the grocery store, interact, like if they wanted ice cream after a meal, we would make them go and purchase it, so that they were getting exposure to putting themselves out there and trying to order something even when they didn't completely speak the language. And if we were going to be someplace a lot where we were seeing the same person, even if we couldn't speak to them in English, we would adopt that person, and we would pray for that person, that bakery person or that grocery store person during our team devotionals. Mm-hmm. And then speaking of team devotionals, that's a place we had the kids that were very active as well. They knew that every day we were going to have a team devotional, and we would, as they got a little bit older, I mean, really from the age of 6, I actually have a poem that Joshua wrote when he was 6 years old for our team devotional. I keep it on my refrigerator. It might be the only poem he's ever written, but for some reason at that devotional, he had this poem in his mind. So he wrote it for it. So that's another area that the kids have interacted with us.
Yeah, one tip a little bit along those lines is that we would give our kids a project allowance, so that they would learn not only how to maybe go buy something, but they would learn about the currency, and they would just have some freedom and flexibility to try different things. But they loved that. It was to have kind of some of their own money, if you will, on the project, and buy that ice cream, that extra ice cream. That's not in the budget, but it's part of their special allowance. So that was always fun. And then kind of along those lines of letting your kids speak into the experience, and we still do this to this day. If you sit around my dinner table with our family, we almost always ask about what the highlight and the low light was of the day. Because even though you want to have this wonderful experience and you want every day to be magical for them, everybody's working hard and not every moment is magical. And so for them to process with you the highlight and the low light, it helps them understand that, yeah, even on the mission field, or especially on the mission field, things can be challenging. And so they have a very wonderful insights. You'll learn a lot. I'm sure you do at home, but just being in a different setting and doing different things, I personally think it's important for them to have a way to process with you, whatever that is. But for us, it's the highlight and the low light of the day.
We have a journal called The Good Book that we've taken on the last several projects, and it has the day and whoever was on the project with us added in the good book something good that happened that day. And sometimes for our kids, it was they got to eat pizza, and other times was they interacted or had a special interaction with the reader. So they weren't high spiritual things always, but we're very real with what we're doing. And so, we would also, I don't think we wrote down low lights, but would have the opportunity to share what is an area that we would want to improve in, or what was an area that was difficult for us. true. So that was true. And there was one other thing you brought to my mind. What was it? Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say allowance or.
Yeah, we've done that. Our kids, actually, they save money all year, and their grandparents give them spending money, and that's actually the money that they use for their souvenirs and everything. And so it's been really fun to watch the kids figure out exchange rates. And Andrew, at a pretty young age, figured out that even though it sounded like when we went to Japan he was going to have a lot of money, it actually didn't buy as much as he was anticipating. And so he learned that it wasn't just how much money you have, but also how expensive things are where you're going. So there's been lots of great opportunities that they have learned through that, through just things like economy and things like that. Yeah. One thing I will say, when you're traveling with very young kids that are 1 year old or, very young, traveling itself is a little harder when you have very young ones, and you don't get over jet lag till your kids get over it. And that was a little bit of a hard thing for me to immediately understand when we first traveled, after having traveled outside of our just Craig and I. And but until kids can't just force themselves to stay awake, they have to wait till their rhythms kind of catch up with the plane ride. And so that could mean that you're getting up much earlier than you were anticipating, and can make sometimes tensions a little high, because you're tired. So if you kind of go into it knowing that, we would say to each other, to Craig and I, we would say, remember, we're not going to get over this till they get over it. So that kind of would give us some patience. Oh, I remember the other thing I was going to share. I was thinking about, so when we used to go and it was just Craig and I, all our free time we would do with other people. And what we learned with our family is that there were times that we needed some time alone and time just with our family. And that meant that either on the weekends, we didn't schedule the whole time off with other people. Sometimes we did some things that just the kids wanted to do. And also we didn't, sometimes we said no to some things. So if, for me to sit in a church service that's all in another language isn't that huge of a deal. But when I had little kids, sometimes that was the hardest place, because I felt like people were watching us, and then the kids weren't all acting the way I wanted them to act. I'm like, I'm not having a godly attitude at this moment. And so we didn't make them do that more than once a week. Like, if we needed to go to something else that the church wanted us to go to, one of us would probably stay with the kids and just have one of us go, and not make the expectations quite so high in that regards.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One summer we were in Croatia, and Luke was in middle school. So we have 3 kids. So Luke's the oldest, and it was just, an angsty time for him. And I forget which Star Wars came out that summer, but he probably saw that movie 5 times in the 6 weeks we were there. A church member would take him, or we would take him. It was just kind of a place where he could just go and be normal, what felt like a normal part of summer. And so I think he's probably saw that movie 5 times, but that's what he needed, and that's what was normal for him a little bit. And so at home, he would have never probably gone paid to go see it 5 times. So that I know that. But over there, it's just, we would say yes to that. So you just never know, what your kids are going to need. One thing, Leslie, you mentioned that, or I don't know, I made me think of something, was make sure your kids know they're going to walk a lot. You walk way more and to more things than you ever do in America. And they probably need to be able to carry their backpack or something, themselves. It doesn't have to be too heavy, but something that they can carry their stuff, a little bit of stuff with them wherever you're journeying to. And so you walk a lot and you do carry your things, and they can do that. It's not a problem. It's different. It's just different from home.
Yeah, this last year we went with my nephew, who was 15 at the time, and we were in Korea. We walked all over. He kept whispering to my son, "Are we ever going to stop?" And Andrew says, "This is what you do." So it was funny to see their different experiences with that. And the other thing too is we hardly ever eat at McDonald's here in America, but overseas, sometimes that's the only place that you can get food quickly, or it's available, and it does feel more like, it feels more normal. So a lot of times we end up eating at McDonald's, especially when our kids were little, more often than we did here. That was just a place that food tasted normal, if we had been having a lot of different food, and so that was, just the plain old regular hamburger was a welcome change for us. So
yeah, when the kids were young, we primarily, Scott and I would split out our time. So I would most likely have readers in the morning hours, or vice versa, and then Scott would have them in the afternoon, and we would swap, and that way the kids got dad to themselves, they got mom to themselves, but Scott and I felt like we could give our readers some undivided attention as well. And so I don't know, maybe we'll talk about each scenario here in a minute, but you can be creative with how you kind of set up your schedule so that you're not feeling like you're neglecting your kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Craig and I did that too when our kids were really small and needed supervision, splitting up the time. What we found is that one of us would read in the morning, and then if they took naps, then we would try to schedule readers during nap time, both of us, and then one of us would read in the afternoon, and maybe we could do one more hour where we were both working at the same time. So we tried to manage that, but also, like you're saying, I just think it's a great opportunity for the kids to get some time with dad and some time with mom. But we tried to always eat our meals together, so that we were a cohesive family unit. That's really how we handled working in a mall. Was I would go in the morning, and then come home, eat lunch. Craig would go, and then we would all go and spend we thought our kids were old enough to handle them all for 2 hours. So we would have about 2 hours of reading together, and then we would all come home. And that worked out fine for us. So, so it is about just praying about what is going to be best for your family. What is the maturity level of your kids? And at what level can they perform? So if they're real little and they're not going to be able to actually do the reading, we would say we were homeschooling, and we would have some things for them to do, reading books. We'd have a room set up and our computer, and they could watch a movie for part of the time. We did we didn't want them just to sit in front of the TV 24/7, but, maybe a movie in the morning and a movie in the afternoon or something like that was a good way to participate. And then as they got older and were doing Minecraft and stuff, they could do that on the computer as well. So those were things. Let me just look to see. There were a couple other things.
You're all going to think I'm a mean mom, but when Micah was a year old, she took her first steps in Belgium, in Antwerp, Belgium, on our project. But I decided when we were done with our project that since we were going to go through jet lag on the way home, that I also was going to wean her of the bottle at the same time. We had a miserable return, but we
took care of everything at one time.
Everything at once. So I don't know if there's something out there like that you need to.
Yeah, we did potty training like that. Came home, took care of everything at one time. Yeah, if we're going to make adjustments, let's just make them all at once.
Yeah.
Just the one other thing, and then we can just take questions. Kim, why do you think doing LST as a family has been an important part of y'all's time together?
Again, for us, the God is way bigger than our little world, was something that was of high value for Scott and I. And so there's that piece of it. And then for our kids to see and then to experience themselves the kind of the power of the word, that we took time out of our busy schedules and we put money invested in it. And what we were investing in, as you know, is people reading the word. And so sometimes that gets lost, at least in our household. We weren't great at devotional time on a regular basis. So we weren't, there was just some things that, we thought we would always do as a Christian family, but we kind of had to sometimes just stop and remind ourselves what was important. And so to pull away and go read the word and get to know people on that level really would reset us and remind us not to let the busyness take over. And so I look back to several LST projects that helped to recenter our family, and I'm very thankful for that. And my kids, they love the Lord and they are chasing after Jesus. And I really think their LST experience was foundational in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would say that was true for our family as well, that we, and I also would say that it presented them with times where they had to question their faith some, and it allowed us to have discussions as they got older, can we really say Jesus is the only way? And I think it made them question about, well, do I really think this is true? And we were able to have really good conversations and honest. I feel like it has allowed us to have very honest conversations that maybe wouldn't have come up till some of my friends talk about some of these conversations happening once their kids got to college. I feel like LST kind of prompted this experience, prompted those conversations a little earlier. And so I'm very grateful for that. And then just the time together as a family, that we're serving together, that we're taking that time. I mean, you slow down, you take time to walk together, you do some public transportation, and in today's world, we're just going so fast. Sometimes we're passing each other on the road. It's so nice that we were all walking in the same direction or riding bikes together in the same direction. And that was a really special time as well.
And it's super fun. Like it's super fun. I don't know. Whatever your family wants to do while you're there, there's just that bonus of having a good time together. So
yeah,
it's a positive, very positive.
Well, I mean, those are kind of the things we wanted to share with you, and just some of the best practices. Of course, we're not telling you there's one set way to do an LST together, because there's not. Like we said at the beginning, so many times our projects were very different depending on what was available. But what kind of questions, after talking, maybe we'll start with you, Cavett and Megan. Do you have any questions specifically for us that we could answer?
Yeah. We're a perfect family and we don't have any questions. We have it all together. We do. No, honestly, I don't think we even know enough yet what to ask. I think this has been very helpful just to hear the candor and what I'm hearing tonight is just take it easy. Really, that one of those first phrases was manage our expectations. I'm one to have grandiose ideas and have, try to put together a big vision of accomplishments and big fruit. And I think through this conversation, I'm reminded of the boys and their playfulness and their respective maturities. And really, it's just going back to what you said, I think, Kim, is our one task is to be an LST family while we're there, and to be together. We'll all have different roles and wear different hats at certain times, but at the end of the day, we're together doing an LST project, and there will be another day tomorrow. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's really true not to beat yourself up if it doesn't go exactly. I had several times where people gave me parenting advice, or we were traveling with college students and they were surprised by how my kids acted. And at the end they would say, well, this was good for me because I see how a normal family looks. And I took that as a compliment that we were definitely a normal family.
Yeah, I think we're going into this with our eyes wide open, in that it's been since 1999 since I did an LST project, and that was the only one I did. And I did it with Ben and Emily Woodward, who can do it with their eyes closed. So, this is going to be new ground basically for us. Wyatt's 10, and I think will want to sit with us. I think he'll want to shadow and see how this goes. Maybe a time or two here and there. But I think giving Winslow, our current 6 years old, chances to play, and remind ourselves that he doesn't have to be engaged in everything all the time, but that he can have plenty of downtime. Mm-hmm. Anyway, looking at the scheduling and seeing how Megan and I can kind of tag team things, divide and conquer, I think that'll be helpful. But also giving them some different roles, planning meals and getting into the event planning and parties, and just really having fun with it. Again, it's just being our one task being an LST family, that being enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good. Very good.
Caitlin, did you have any questions?
Not at this point. I haven't thought too much about. Our kids are 1 and 3, so they're not going to be doing too much to help out with the actual teaching side of things. Right. But just thinking through, I need to bring things for them to do, and we'll probably do the one person watches them in the morning and then the other person watches them in the afternoon type of thing. They both don't nap. Well, one of them naps, but there isn't a nap where they're both napping, sadly.
Yeah. It's a sad day when the naps start going away.
There was this beautiful time.
Maybe you could knock them into that. Everybody in Japan naps.
Yeah.
Maybe I can convince my oldest to go back to napping. Maybe with the jet lag, she'll probably take naps. But yeah. So, just trying to involve her and being like, okay, what do you want to eat? The meal planning, because she could help me with that. And what do you like to eat? Although her default meal is always German pancakes, so I'm not sure how helpful.
Yeah.
Pancakes all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, people always thought we were crazy to go with our 1 and 3-year-old. And to be honest, I would come back and be like, it would be crazy not to go with them. So kudos to you for doing it. And in some ways, and this might sound weird, Cabot and Megan, it's almost easier in a weird sort of way to go when they're super young, only because it gets harder later as your kids get older and more involved in sports and activities and friends and girlfriends. Then they don't want to go.
Yeah,
and we made them go, but when they're younger, they're your captive audience, and they just want to be with you. They really want to be wherever you are, and so kudos to you for making the LST work as a couple, as a family, and going. So it could be done. It really, I love, my babies took their first steps on LST projects. So.
So are you saying we should also take our 2-year-old twins?
Well, I think you're very wise to going 2 and 2 right now, and then you'll add them as you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll wait.
Maybe in time.
Yeah.
I want to learn
Twins
how
is
to
a different issue.
You're way outnumbered. You need a break.
Yes. Well, this is going to be wonderful, I think.
Yeah.
Without them.
Without them.
I would imagine. Yep.
Well, good. Well, I'm gonna. I have a handout that's just a best practice handout that we've put together, so I'll email that to you guys to have. And it says I have a series of articles on raising children that Mark Woodward wrote, raising children to have a heart for missions. And so I need to check on how to send that, but I'll send that out as well as a follow-up to our conversation. But I'm thankful that you guys are going. I'm thankful that you are giving your kids the opportunity to see you, to have the visual idea of what it's like to share Jesus with other people. For them to know that this is important for mom and dad is just a great opportunity for them. So thank y'all for committing to taking your kids, and we're here to partner with you the whole way. So I'm both of your team developers. So if you have any questions as we continue to map through this process, or if we need to address anything before you go, just let me know what your concerns are, and I'll be happy to do as much as we can before time and then being flexible afterwards. So, yeah.
Right.
Any final words, Kim?
Just that we'll be praying for you guys. I'm going to specifically pray for, it's Wyatt and Winslow, right? That they each have, it just takes one friend in Croatia, one little friend to come alongside them to make it an extra special experience. So I'm going to be praying specifically for that, for Wyatt and Winslow. And then Caitlin, for your little ones, I'm going to pray that they do take afternoon naps. I think that would be a sweet part of your journey to have a little respite during the craziness. So God bless you guys, and just know we are walking this with you and before you and with you, and you won't regret it. So thanks for going.
Yeah. So thank y'all so much, and I'll just close this out with a prayer, and then we'll disconnect. But dear Heavenly Father, I just pray great blessings over these families that are going to go to share you in hopefully Japan and in Croatia. God, we are so blessed to have such great families to be a part, and I am just so grateful that LST all these years has wanted to be in a place of family missions. Mm-hmm. And I'm grateful for the opportunity for all of my children and these children to be able to see what it's like and to have a visual image of sharing Jesus around the world. God, I pray that they will just be impacted, and they will just continue to grow to know and to love you. And this is the blessing that we ask on them tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. God bless.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Have a great night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.